Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Dark Season 3, Episode 2. It's called The Survivors. So, full spoilers for the episode as always. The survivors in question are Francesca, they are Bartos, they are Magnus, who all travelled back right before the apocalypse to the 1880s to be with middle-aged Jonas.
Yes. I would also say that the survivors includes, Peter and Elizabeth in the...
Oh, sure. Yeah.
The present day-ish.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we got other batches of, survivors in the context of the apocalypse, I suppose, to be specific. And they actually do address something that we were questioning last episode, where we were wondering, why Jonas is unfamiliar with this being a Martha from another world. And very point blank, he is surprised when she says that younger Jonas, travelled to this other world, because he's like, I never did that. What are you talking about? That's a lie.
So this is new, which was one of the two options we said it could have been.
Yeah, and the others, of course, kind of freak out. Francesca does talk, these are all Earth 1 characters. And I'm more
for now.
And I'm more convinced after this episode that transition effect is going between Earths, because it never did it in this one until the very end.
Yes, and actually, I'd forgotten, it actually does have a really smart way of telling us when it jumps between time periods, which I'd forgotten about.
The sound.
The ticking sound that it does, which is only when it switches times. So we've got one that's clearly for time and one for Earths. Yeah.
And this episode is, again, barring the small bit at the end, is pretty much all on Earth 1, and it is catching up mostly with the 80s, but there is some, obviously, other time periods. There's a little bit of the 1880s, there's a little bit of the just after the apocalypse, and then there's also a little bit of 2050s as well. So we are jumping around a lot without going further back. We do. 1880s is really far back, but there's no 50 stuff is what I'm trying to say. Well, 1950s.
No 50s or 20s.
No, 1950s. I should yes. specify that. So it's getting confusing. Okay, so yeah, first thing I will say, I was surprised because one of the things that I was really excited to catch up on this episode was Katarina, who was left in the 80s looking for Mikhail at the end of season 2, and she's been there for a while, to the point where when she goes to the police station, the police officer's just kind of like, oh, you again, you won't even tell us your name, we can't give you information, blah blah blah.
This is still more or less all happening concurrently within the timeline, right? So it's always pretty much September in all of these time periods, which and I think we left it in the end of June, Apocalypse Day, the end of season 2. So yeah, it's been about 3 months.
Yeah, so she's showing up, she's looking for flyers, and she has an encounter with her younger self, younger Ulrich, and this encounter. And she threatens young Hannah as well, notably. Creepy little moment there. But that scene was pretty enjoyable, but there's a thing that's dropped here, I think it's Ulrich or something, says about, the crazy old man, came after, he's back in the hospital, blah, blah, blah. And then when she brings that up later in front of the cop or whoever, someone calls him the inspector, right? And it kind of
that's when she goes and visits the place. She doesn't have the name yet. She's like, oh, he's been here for 34 years. And
okay. And it's actually her own mother who's working there.
Yes, which I love how smartly they introduced her maiden name earlier in the episode. Maybe we've heard this before. It's quite possible.
Oh yeah, we'd never have remembered it though.
But I wouldn't have remembered that. But they, made a point of mentioning it to younger Katarina earlier in the episode, so that when we see this name tag here, we immediately know.
But it's when she hears that he's called the inspector that she basically makes the leap of who it is. And it's a possibility we knew could happen, I think, last season when she was in the 80s, is that is she going to meet older Ulrich? Is she going to meet old man? One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I say that because he actually bears a resemblance to one of the characters from that movie. And she comes in and he's not even looking at her at first, he's just focusing on whatever game he's playing in front of him. And
chess.
She just leans in and holds his hand, and I was not expecting this to be as sweet as it is, and I think there's a lot of layers to the drama between these two characters, and given everything they've went through, because obviously the show started with Ulrich cheating on her, and her kind of slow realization of that, and everything that's came out, and obviously losing the son, and all this stuff. there's something about her finding him, having spent 30 plus years imprisoned because he was looking for their son. You know, obviously he was just unlucky and went to the wrong time period, but there's something about her sort of recognizing that and actually sort of connecting with him here in a sweet kind of, I'm going to get you out of here, which is interesting because Hannah in the 50s did not make that choice. Hannah in the 50s chose to be vindictive and said, no, I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to let them think you're the craziest bastard there is and punish you for it.
I think that's kind of why I was expecting this to be as sweet as it was, because so much of Ulrich's stuff in season 2 was surprisingly emotional. Like season 1, he wasn't like, you know, a bad character or anything like that, but I feel like he got so much depth in season 2, and all these moments where he was just desperately trying to get his son, and you know, being questioned, all these things had a lot of weight to them. I
think why it was surprising to me is that it was more Katarina's reaction to him, and I think her reaction to his, you know, older self sitting there. I think it's, you know, it's almost like, obviously in a lot of ways she probably wanted to see him, you know, get, not, I mean, maybe be punished is the wrong term, but she wanted his comeuppance for what he'd done to her, for the cheating, for maybe not being as you know, there as a dad or whatever, right? But it's almost like this is above and beyond anything she thought he deserved, and seeing him sit here being alone for the last 30 plus years and no one believing him, and like the fact that it was all in the service of trying to find their son, there's kind of this acknowledgement of, well, he had his flaws, but
I was going to say it's all in the past, but that's not strictly true.
I mean, she's also in the past. There's a lot in the past right now.
There really is. Yeah,
there's a lot of past going on. So I mean, that was basically the whole plot for them. But
yeah, the only other thing I wanted to say with her stuff is at the start when she was walking around, you know, with the backpack on, she really looked kind of like Claudia.
Yeah, no. In fact, at one point later on, we see Claudia in the 2050s. I actually thought for a second it was Katarina. And the only reason why I didn't, because it was a shot from behind, the only reason why I did it is because the backpack looked different. I thought, well, she's got a different backpack. Maybe this is someone else.
But I think that is very intentional that they're doing this. You know, they wouldn't costume it up so similarly if they didn't want us to notice. And I don't know why, but I couldn't help but notice it.
Yeah, so that was their plot, unless we want to count the other scene with young Katarina, with her mother. Her mother's quite angry at her and demanding.
Yeah, I think that ties in nicely with this stuff, because her mother doesn't necessarily recognize her, but she has a moment of familiarity, right, with her adult daughter. And it's clearly gotten to her. It's under her skin, because when she comes home, I don't know if she's always like this with her teenage daughter. Maybe she is. But she feels rattled by this encounter.
Because Katarina, when she meets her at the hospital, brings up a couple of details. You know, says a couple of things about the necklace, about, you know, some,
which I think is really noble. That is, if not the same necklace, a very, very similar one to the one that Jonas found, you know, on the beach and gave to Martha. That's that necklace.
Great, more time travel stuff to deal with. In fact, actually, something we should mention here is, I mean, it's fairly minor on the grand scheme of like connections, but to shift over to, I guess, Claudia and by extension Regina and the Tronte stuff in the 80s, is that now Ulrichs and Regina might be siblings, because it implies that Tronte might be the father of Regina, who was never revealed.
A very strong implication of that. And maybe it's like they're not even certain. Like, I don't know if Tronte knows for sure, but they're aware it's a strong possibility.
And it may not be even that important or even that meaningful ultimately, other than just being a little thing, you know, a little connection that's not.
It's just one more thing that makes these four families one.
Yes, that's true. Yes, they're all one, and I feel like all this stuff with Tronte, because I feel like this is the most Tronte got, because Tronte didn't get a whole lot. I mean, he was always there in the 80s stuff. We made a point of introducing him. I mean, the only thing I really remember about Tronte is the reveal that he was having an affair with Claudia. There wasn't really much more with him beyond just reacting to his son being missing, or
and if I recall, that affair was something we even knew about from like the 2019 stuff first, because when Ulrich went to Regina, he was like, did you know about, you know, our parents.
Mm.
So I don't think it was even like a surprise at the time when it got to that. So like I say, he had more in the 2019 period than he did in the 80s for sure.
Yeah. And I'd say also more in the 1950s than he did in the 80s as well. I feel like Kid Tronte was a big factor of the 50s episodes.
Yeah, that's fair.
Which is all just to say that this was probably the most development the middle-aged Tronte's had, I think.
Yes.
You know, him having that sweet moment where he comes in and holds his wife's hand at the end, because he has a moment with Regina, young Regina, where she's in the car with him, and she gets kind of awkward and has to be dropped off because he's asking questions about, you know, did your mother ever mention me? And he's just prodding because, you know, obviously Claudia is now missing as far as everyone's concerned. You know, Egon's dead, she's missing, Madge has just went missing recently as well. All this stuff's going on, and he's asking these questions. It's almost like he's trying to like connect with someone who might be also his child. You know, he's lost one son. He's going to check. maybe I can get a daughter here. Bizarrely,
it's nice what he's doing. It feels like there's a little bit of an ulterior motive in some degree, that he kind of just wants the information on Claudia, whatever he can get, but he doesn't go about it maliciously. He's very nice to Regina here.
The more malicious element, though, is actually back in, or ahead in the 2050s, because we have Claudia starting her wall, like all the photos and stuff, and she's putting all that stuff together, and she goes and visits. In fact, that even might be the just after the apocalypse, that perspective, because she's jumping around. But she goes to see Regina, who's now in the future. She took her to the future, and she's on her deathbed.
Yep. And
she has kind of a meeting with her, but then old man Tronte comes in, and he actually, this actually may not be the 2050s. This may be like 2020. That's or just after 2020.
It could be the 2020.
Yeah, because I think it is, because I think I remember thinking, oh, old man Tronte went to the future, and I went, oh no, it's only like a year. He's probably just a year later. This doesn't have to be time travel. So I think that's the one that was just after. But he comes in and he says, she said this needs to happen to fix everything, or to fix you so you can live. And I think the obvious assumption is when he says she, he's meaning Claudia, but there's some room there for a swerve.
There definitely is. There's, you know, one other big character that I think it could be that ties in with the alternate Earth stuff. But Claudia, I think, is the safest option right now.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of talk about saving everyone. Between this and then between all the stuff that we get later on with Martha in the 1880s, where, you know, Bartos takes her down to, you know, the den where Adam, because that's the other big thing that happens here, is that she knows who Adam is and they don't, and they know that Adam killed Martha. So Bartos is kind of gobsmacked when she says, Jonas is Adam here. You realise that, right?
That's quite the bombshell to drop on them.
It's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big deal as far as plot developments go for these characters. Jonas conveniently left that part out when he was getting them all on board to like help build these time machine and everything else. So, you know, and we see, you know, Claudia's tinkering with the portable device, the small version, obviously, that we've had since season 1. All these things are going on, and characters are kind of, you know, kind of forming allegiances and deciding where they're going. The other big thing that you mentioned earlier is just after the apocalypse, we have Peter with a beard with Elizabeth, who conveniently now we're on Earth 1 and she's like 2 years older. It actually makes sense because we're actually at least a year later.
Yeah, I mean, technically we're only like a few months later than where we ended season 2, but from the start of the show, it's about a year. I mean, I think it's a little bit over a year, maybe.
Yeah, most of what we've seen from her, though, was probably in season 1, so we'll go with it.
I think ultimately, I think the drastic shift of the apocalypse makes it feel later. It's why I think in our minds there's a lot of overlap right now between the 2020 and the 2050 stuff.
Yeah, there wasn't, because there wasn't a lot of 2050 stuff. There was only like one scene in 2050. Everything else was the 2020s.
But right now, because those settings visually are so similar,
they are.
Whereas all the others are really, time appropriate and really distinctive.
Yeah, the one scene that was in the 2050s is when middle-aged Claudia. She looks older, though, because her hair's like all wet and drenched, and she's in the raincoat. But she goes and visits... actually, see in that scene? No, but Charlotte's there. Charlotte's with older Elizabeth. There was a lot of little scenes in this episode. I actually felt this as I was coming out of the episode that there was a lot of little things, like just little one-off scenes that I knew were going to be harder to talk about, because typically how I remember these episodes, as well as I do, arguably if I do, is because it'll break down into 3 or 4 plots, character threads that I can sort of attach to. But there was definitely a few things here that were just kind of on their own, and
yeah, just setting up where this is right now, and thematically ties in with other bits of the episode rather than being its own thing.
Yeah. To go back though to Peter and Elizabeth, they're checking to see if Francesca and Charlotte are amongst the bodies, because we see a bunch of photos of various characters who have died in the apocalypse, and they're not there. And of course, we see here that Charlotte seems to be in the 2050s, and obviously Francesca's back in the 1880s, so we know where they are.
Complete opposite ends of the scale.
But they're looking for them. But there is an interaction here where they're looking for stuff, and a young Noah shows up. Because they're actually in the house. They're in Hannah's house.
Yes.
And they're looking for things and people, and he comes in and he talks about wanting to take care of her, and Peter gets very defensive. And I mean, we know this is our future. Well, maybe not husband. I don't have to get married, but
baby daddy.
Yeah, future baby daddy. And obviously Peter's averse to him going anywhere near her. But hey, if you want your wife to be born,
and Peter knows this, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and because he definitely seems to know who this is, like from context.
Yeah. Yeah, but he still, stay away from her. Like that's still his attitude, and
I think that's where Noah's confidence here, where he's like, I'm going to protect her. You say you're protecting her, but you can't. I can. And I feel like Peter might be facing a tragic end soon.
I would not be surprised. I would not be surprised if there's many tragic ends, but that then get, undone at the end, however we end this. I mean, assuming there's some sort of happy ending, which isn't necessarily a given.
Yeah, we can't be sure of that.
By any means. We did have another scene with our mystery triple aged person. That's what I'm calling him. I'll probably just call him Lip Scar. From henceforth, he is Lip Scar.
Do you know what? They feel familiar. I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like they're reminiscent of someone. I can't quite put my finger on it.
The middle one's very intimidating.
Honestly, it's the kid that feels most familiar to me.
Interesting. But he's actually, again, it's a fairly minor scene in the context of things. It's basically there's a scene setting this up where Tronte goes to the nuclear plant, and he wants to speak to the woman who works there and ask about Claudia, and she says that for the last week before she disappeared, she was always so caring about her appearance and her hair, and like always being very proper, and she let everything go. She was clearly had something on her mind. She was wearing suits multiple days in a row. She wasn't like fixing things up. She was being sloppy. She just in a sense that she clearly had something else on her mind. She was acting out of character. But this is important because later on we see this woman sort of go into the office, and in Claudia's office, this Scarlett is Scarlett. I always say Lip Scar, but Scarlett says I'm saying Scarlet.
It does.
Scarlet. Yes. So he's in there looking through files, and she's like, "Oh, what are you doing in here? You're trespassing. I'm going to call security or police or whatever." And he pulls out the garrote again, and just kind of we get like a very sort of well shot scene of just like her struggling at the window from the other side, just enough to get the sense of the horror of it.
The old and the young both did the hand cross thing again. It was the exact same movement.
Yeah, so we're building a pattern there. And we're clearly building up to whoever this is. Like, this is going to be a big deal this season.
Clearly, yeah.
So,
I get the impression maybe they're an Earth 2 version of something.
Something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure exactly who, but they feel like maybe that would explain why we don't quite recognize them.
But everyone who's got an Earth 2 version still look like the person, so I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, we've got Hannah pregnant again.
Oh yeah, that was the one theory last episode, is that baby turns out to be this dude. But I mean, but that's not an Earth 2 version of something. That's just an Earth 2 thing.
It's kind of an Earth 2 version of Jonas, I kind of suppose, but in a roundabout way.
No, Martha's the Earth 2 version.
You know what I mean here. Also, While we're on that topic of Martha, I vote we call old woman Martha Eve.
Okay. Okay, I see what you did there.
I mainly that because when they're in the room at the end, there was a very Adam and Eve looking picture, and it was like, well, I'm assuming that's intentional, and it made me go, yeah, that's a solid counterpart name.
Yeah. I will say that I didn't enjoy this episode as much as the first one, and I think it's because there's definitely some highlights. There's definitely some moments I really liked, and there's nothing wrong with it as a whole. But I think this one is really about getting a lot of characters, kind of getting them the information they need to go forward in the plot. So,
I think episode 1 was so exciting because it was all new in this way, even though it was the first episode again, right? It was new. It was like, it expanded into this other Earth, and everything was so fresh because of that. Whereas this one is, okay, let's remind you where everyone who you already knew is now, and kind of go from there. It's just kind of this. For all intents and purposes, this is ultimately an episode 1 of the season for these characters.
Yeah,
for the vast majority of this episode.
Yeah, and I think because of that, it's definitely less exciting and still solid, but not one that I'm raving about as much as episode 1. And that said, though, I do think the Katarina and Ulrich encounter, like their meeting of old man Ulrich. I really like that scene. That's probably my favorite moment in this episode.
That's really good.
Be quite a margin. But
I suspect this might end up being like the weakest episode of the season. Should all go to plan. Just because of functionally what it has to do, I can see why it's the least exciting one.
Yeah. So, absolutely. I mean, there's definitely good moments in there, but it suffers from. Just I don't want to quite call it the moving the pieces around the chessboard episode, which we sometimes use for.
It's putting the pieces on the chessboard instead.
Yes, yes, pretty much. So I don't want to be too harsh sounding on it, but it is definitely worth mentioning that we don't have as much to dig into with this episode. I feel like a lot of the characters talking about what they're going to do, it was still kind of along the same vague lines of we want to save everyone, we're going to do something to save both worlds. There was a lot of talk with Martha in that about how even though Jonas didn't exist in Earth 2, things still happened the same. Or in fact, that was old Martha at the end specifically.
Yes, it happens in 3 days, so it's an accelerated schedule because they're still in November from the start of the show at that point.
Yeah, the apocalypse in Earth 2 starts sooner. That was kind of the cliffhanger. That was the episode 2 cliffhanger.
Yeah, and the other thing I think we should probably mention is Tannhaus, the old man in the 80s.
Mm-hmm. The watchmaker.
He's the watchmaker's like, I don't know. No, the 1880s that we've got now.
Oh, the 1880s. The blind man, yes.
The blind man, which is also Tannhaus. I'm assuming a grandfather or something of the watchmaker would kind of stand to reason, right?
Yeah.
But this is his factory. But he's this old blind man who knows what's going on. He knows they're travelers. He seems to have been his parents and were members of Sigmundus and kind of founded the group. And he's the last member of Sigmundus right now, and he's kind of passing that on to Jonas and
that's something that Bartos is talking to Martha about, is he's dedicated his life to building this layer and building all this so that Jonas can take it further. He's dedicated his life to advancing.
Yeah, like he mentions, I can't remember if it was his parents or grandparents that were part of this group, but they all believed that this was possible, but it never happened in their lifetimes, and he was the last member left alive to see this.
Yeah, one detail I actually quite liked is I think it's just after the apocalypse. We hear some news at one point talking about how the authorities are still trying to figure things out, but on the date of the apocalypse, scientists are theorizing that time literally stood still for like a brief moment.
I think it was the Earth stood still.
The Earth stood still for a brief moment.
Like a nanosecond or something, but that one seismic complete halt just threw the oceans out of whack, everything.
Yeah. So
fascinating little bit of world building, just kind of thrown in the background.
no, it's good stuff. But I think I specifically like the detail where they're like, no, they think they know that this town is the epicenter. They know that whatever caused this came from this town. So I like that detail, that it's not like the rest of the world's clueless. It's not like it's just affected this town. It genuinely is the entire planet went through this apocalyptic change because of the time shenanigans that are going on in this one town.
Yeah, and it explains, if they know that this is the epicenter, why there is all the military who are here and want to wall it in. They want to close off the city and such, because they obviously know this stuff happened here specifically, and we want to keep that away.
Yeah. So, some interesting bits of world building in there, and at least one really good character scene that I really loved in episode 2. But now looking forward to episode 3. By all means, let us know what you thought of this one in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all that stuff. Liking is really important on YouTube. It lets YouTube know that you think we're worth recommending out, and they will do so, and more people will find us, and it's a great way of helping us. You can also support us financially over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month, and get bonuses for your troubles and keep all the content coming. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?